Hey everyone, hope you all are well. The first thing I'm doing today, as always, is priming the eye area, and to do that I'm using the Urban Decay Eyeshadow Primer Potion, and I'm just adding a few swipes of this across my eyelid, and now I'm using the Sigma 3D HD Precision Brush just to buff and blend that into the skin around the eye, anywhere that I'll be adding shadow. And I always say this, but this brush is really great for this step due to its shape. After I've carved out the shape on my brows, I use this brush to buff the concealer down to the lash line, and it ensures that I keep that sharpness right at the base of the brow. I'm starting out today with the Sleek Makeup Eye Divine Ultra Mattes Volume 2 eyeshadow palette, and I've picked up that white eyeshadow on a double-ended brush that came with the Urban Decay Naked Cyber palette. I'm adding a very light dusting of this shadow under the arch of the brow, and then up to the tip and down to the tail. And I know it's a white, which is kind of scary looking at first, but because I'm using a fluffy brush and a light hand, it'll give me a subtle appearance. Next then, I'm taking this matte green eyeshadow from Inglot. It's a shade that's part of the Freedom system, and it's number 384. And I'm using the fluffy side of the double-ended brush that came with the Urban Decay Ultraviolet palette to apply this shade. This brush is nice and tapered, which allows me to get into that crease area nicely to apply the shadow. Now, this eyeshadow isn't one of Inglot's best. It picks up nicely on the brush, it swatches nicely on the skin, but the pigmentation I find just doesn't really translate onto the eye. The shadow requires a lot of layers to get it looking anyway opaque. Now an alternative here would be to use a base underneath it. It does perform better with the use of a base, but it had been a long time since I used this shade and I forgot that it needed that bit of extra help. But anyway, it's not the end of the world. It just means that I have to take my time and build up the shadow in a few layers, which is what I'm doing now, as you can see. And I'm just blending the shadow back and forward in the crease, and then I'm winging it out on that outer edge. I'm blending it out at an angle, aiming towards the tail of the brow, just so that I've got a nice elongated feel to the look. Now I'm flipping that brush around and I'm using the small bullet shaped end to sweep this shadow down along the lower lash line. Now the more dense the brush, the more product it'll apply. So as you can see, the lid and lash line match in terms of vibrancy, but I've only added one layer along the lower lash line, and this gives you an idea of the difference a particular style of brush can make to your application. So I'm just adding a final layer of the green now, and then I'm going to my Sleek palette again, and I'm taking this deep matte green this time. I've picked this up on a Sedona Lace EB09 Universal Blending Brush, and I'm beginning by tapping this down on the outer third of the eyelid. So I'm slowly using little sweeping motions to pull this up to the crease. Then I'm switching to a mix of circular motions and sweeping motions to pull this colour across into the crease. And initially I'm keeping this colour kind of deep in the crease, and then I'm fading it up lightly upwards so that it blends in nicely with that previous green. Naturally, I'm not pulling it up as far as the previous shade because I still want that to be seen in the finished look. I want a nice gradient to the shadow. Like with the previous shade, I'm building up this shadow in a couple of light layers. So I'm reapplying now, just swirling it onto the outer part of the eyelid and then pulling it up to the crease. Once I'm happy with how that looks, then I'm flipping the brush around and using that small dense end just to sweep some of that green down along the lower lash line. And I'm mainly working this on the outer half of the lid, and then I'm pulling the rest, whatever's left on my brush, in towards the tear duct. Now I'm taking the Stoned Vibes palette from Urban Decay, and I'm using the shade Jade now on a flat C-shaped brush from Sigma. I've picked up some shadow on my brush, I've then spritzed the brush with some water, and now I'm patting this shadow down onto the lid. And this is a gorgeous glitzy green, it's really beautiful, and I'm just adding a couple of layers of this. So I add one layer wet, and now I'm tapping on another layer of the shadow, this time dry, and I just find the combination of the two methods just really helps the shadow to pop. I'm really palette hopping today now. I'm going to the Mandalorian palette, and I'm taking that gorgeous glitzy golden shade called the Force. I've just picked this up on a clean C-shaped brush, and now I'm adding this to the remaining inner half of the eyelid, and I'm overlapping it then with that green in the centre just to make sure those two shades fade nicely into one another. And I'm using the same process here as with the last shade. I'm adding one layer of the shadow wet, one layer of the shadow dry just to make those shimmery particles really pop. And I think this is the first St. Patrick's Day tutorial that I've done that I've featured a gold in it. I'm not really sure why I haven't done it before, but I really like how it looks. So now I'm using one of the NARS Longwear eyeliner pencils just to coat the inner waterline, the bottom and the top, and close my eye around the pencil. And then I'm jumping back to the Sleek Volume 2 palette, and I'm using the black eyeshadow in the palette on a little C-shaped brush. This one is from Sedona Lace, and I'm starting by patting this shadow down on the outer third of the eyelid, just right in at that lash line initially, and the shape of this brush really helps me to get right in at that lash line, and then I'm pulling the colour upwards from there. So I've started at the outer third of the lash line, and then I'm making kind of a C shape and swinging that shadow up into the crease. So once I've looped that shadow from the lash line up into the crease, I'm then extending that a little bit further, and I'm going all the way across the crease with that black eyeshadow into the deepest part of the crease to add some depth. And what I like about this brush is not only does it apply shadow very well, it's also small enough but not too dense that I'm able to blend with it too. So that's what I'm doing now. Then I'm switching to a small angled brush, and I've picked up a little more of that black eyeshadow again, and I'm just pulling this brush up and under the lashes, and then I'm pressing in at the lash line and wriggling that brush from outer to inner corner. Once I'm happy with how the bottom lash line looks, then I'm moving on to the upper lash line, and again I'm just pressing the black eyeshadow into the lash line right at the roots of those lashes. Then I'm going and I'm moving back to the Mandalorian palette. I'm using that very first shade in the palette. I've picked this up on a small bullet shaped brush from Wet n Wild, and I'm just sweeping that around the tear duct of the eye just to add a nice bit of a pop and brightness to that area. Then I've added some lashes. These are the So Sue London lashes, and I'm using now the It Cosmetics mascara, their brand new one, to coat my bottom lashes, and then also to blend my own lashes in with the false ones. But then that's it. So I hope you enjoyed the tutorial. I hope you have a wonderful St. Patrick's Day, whatever you choose to do, and I will catch you all in a video really soon.